Here we go, ninjas and ninjettes. Chapter 1, The Butterfly. Outside of my mom's netting, the first thing I remember is my real dad, Richard Bruce, building a haunted house in our basement. I must have been 2 years old at the time. My brother Rob, my sister Teresa, and I explored all through that haunted house, which he had built out of blankets and shit like that. He recorded this tape of his voice saying, I'm over here, find me, I'm over here. And he hid the tape player under some blankets. We crawled all through that haunted house, all dark and scary, until we found the tape recorder and realized it wasn't really him. To me, that was the shit. The only other thing I remember about my real dad, Rick, was him throwing a TV set at my mom. She was standing at the bottom of the stairs and he was up at the top. They were arguing. He disappeared from the top of the staircase and came back with a TV set and threw it down at my mom. She had to yank me out of the way as it came crashing down. That is the very last memory I have of my real dad. I can't believe that I actually remember something that happened when I was only 2 fucking years old, but I do. Them times must have really been major incidents for me to still remember them now. After that, Rick and my mom Linda officially split up. The last thing they did together was to pull all the money out of their joint bank account so they could divide it up and go their separate ways. Going out to drive away, Rick suddenly grabbed all the money from my mom's hands and jumped in his homie's car and just took off. That was the last time my mom ever seen him. He never paid no child support or nothing. My mom was just left assed out. That's why if I ever meet my real dad again nowadays, I have no choice but to beat his ass. Leaving us kids forever never bothered me at all. I was happy as a kid without his ass around. Snatching that money from my mom's hands though, and leaving her to struggle, trying to find money to feed 3 kids, that calls for an ass kicking in my book, and this is my fucking book. Even if I don't ever see him until he's like 80, I have no choice but to beat his old ass. I'll monkey flip his ass out of his wheelchair if I gotta. With my real dad gone, we were mad poor, but we lived in a pretty nice suburb of Detroit called Berkeley. It was just off 11 Mile Road, which is about 3 miles north of Detroit in Oakland County. My mom worked nights in Birmingham, Michigan as a church janitor. So while she was gone, we were like stray dogs out there. But I didn't care. I have no complaints. I fucking loved all of it. When my mom worked the late shift, it just meant we were allowed out until she got home, which was the bomb. I hate it when people front like, oh, I was raised so poor, it was horrible as a little kid. That's bullshit in my eyes. I don't think being broke-ass poor really affects you until you get to middle school and high school. That's when other kids notice you have shitty clothes on and you're gripping a piece of shit bike and some dirty-ass $15 track shoes. At elementary school level of life, though, you don't really give a fuck if you're poor. Nobody does. Nobody notices dumb shit like that. All you really care about is playing, adventure, pretending, and all that fresh-ass little kid shit that comes for free in life. During the summertime, my mom would drop us off with Mary Wool. I guess Mary was somehow our summer babysitter. I don't know where or how my mom met her, but I remember this lady was a fucking witch. This bitch was straight out of hell. She was pure evil. Today, as a grown-ass ninja, I look back in awe at what an evil bitch this lady was to us little-ass kids. I'm sure she's still a horrid bitch today, if she's still alive and hasn't fucked off yet. My mom would drop us off over there at 8 in the morning when she went to work and pick us up around 6 when she got off. Mary's idea of daycare would be to leave us outside all day in this fucked up fenced-in backyard. On the hot days, my brother, sister, and I used to dare each other to go up and ask Mary Wool for a drink of water. If we did, she would just bitch about it. Sometimes she'd squirt the hose at us. Like I said, she was a witch. I don't think my mom really ever knew how bad this lady was. I mean, she knew that Mary Wool was a bitch and all, but I don't think she ever really knew just how bad she was. Even if she did, there was nothing we could really do. My mom was even more broke now with my dad gone, being a janitor and raising 3 kids alone. She didn't have the funds to hire us a Mary Poppins lady, so Mary Wool had to do. When I say there wasn't anybody else to watch us, I mean literally there wasn't nobody else to watch us. My mom had no other choice but the Mary Wool hellhole. My grandma Delilah Grober couldn't watch over us because she was always ill. She was in and out of an insane asylum for the whole second half of her life. The way my mom explained it, when my grandma was in her 20s, right after she had her kids, things went bad for her. She was really beautiful and people used to stare at her a lot. She began to become paranoid over it all. Everyone constantly staring at her and talking about her under their breath. She just went insane from it. Flat out paranoid schizophrenic, I guess. She'd come home every weekend, but she'd just be mad doped up, not saying anything that made any sense. She usually would just sit there in this big red chair and smile at us. She died about 25 years ago. My mom says that my grandma is now super happy in heaven because her soul is finally free from her sick mind and body. My grandpa Val Grober, he couldn't watch over us back then either. He was way too busy working his ass off all the time. He constantly worked. He was a great person. From the time his wife got sick and went away until she died, he stayed with her. He never left her for nothing. My grandpa was the fucking bomb. He used to teach golf and do landscaping. He worked hard right up until he died about 13 years ago. Some consider him a local Detroit area golfing legend, so I hear. The only other family we had were my 2 uncles. They both were busy living their own separate lives, and neither one had any time to watch over us. Now, my mom's 2 brothers couldn't possibly be any more different from one another. First of all, you got my Uncle Larry. He worked his way through college and has, in my eyes, schooled it in life. He is every bit of what you would call a model citizen, a good family man. He was always known as Rich Uncle Larry to us because he would always help my mom out with $80 here or $100 there. He saved our asses many a times when we were kids. He seemed so rich to us back then. Now that I'm grown, I realize the only reason Uncle Larry seemed so rich to us back then was because he wasn't on welfare like the rest of us. He wasn't really that rich at all. He was just chilling. And then you got my other uncle, Uncle Steve. He was pretty much the crazy-ass gone wrong uncle. He did an 8-year prison bid for robbing a gang of 7-Elevens when I was a kid. He was a drug addict with a gat. When he got out after his long 8, he came to live with us for a while on the tether. He was always ripping off my grandpa, my mom, and just always giving everybody hell. He even ripped me off a few years ago when I gave him 2 of each of all of our CDs, t-shirts, and every other kind of ICP merchandise we have. He said he wanted it all to start his own collection, so I gave him a fat-ass box of shit. 2 days later, a friend of ours from a local record store called and said, "Some crackhead older guy was just up here trying to sell a complete 2 of everything ICP collection." That bastard Uncle Steve. Anyway, Uncle Steve later passed away from a methadone overdose and is no longer with us. So that's the demise of Uncle Steve. Now that you're familiar with my entire family, hopefully you realize why we were stuck with Mary Wool. There just wasn't anybody else to watch us. My mom knew we hated her, so every time she came home sick from work or something, she'd always come get us from Mary's house with the quickness. If we complained about Mary Wool, all she'd say was, "There's nothing I can do about it. I don't know who else to get." She was telling the truth. There really wasn't nobody else. Rob, Teresa, and I tried to make the best of it in that fenced-in backyard. The only good part was his brown dog from across the street. Some days, he would dig a hole under his fence when he heard us playing, and he would make his way over to us and hang out with us for the day. Then at the end of the day, we would return the dog, fill in the hole that he dug, and say goodbye. We would do our best to hide the dog from Mary bitch-ass Wool, because he was the best thing we had going for us over there. We loved him, and that would have been reason enough for her to put a stop to it. The rest of the time was passed with the help of our imaginations. We'd find an old lawnmower or something, and we'd be like, "Let's turn this into an airplane, you guys, and let's actually build an airplane." We thought for sure 100% we could actually do that. You know, dreams that would last a day long. The fact is that children will be children no matter where you put them. We still managed to gain some pretty fresh memories out of that yard. One time, a big June bug landed right there in the dirt in the middle of us. We all sat around and stared at this crusty ass fucking June bug. You know those ones you see stuck to the side of the trees? It's one of them things you only notice when you're a little kid, like anthills and caterpillars. When was the last time you actually saw a caterpillar or a crusty ass June bug shell stuck to the side of a tree? When you're a little ass kid, you notice that stuff because that's all you got going on, so that shit matters. This June bug looked like it was about to die, yet it was crawling on the ground. It was old, wicked looking, and crusty like a little ugly ass monster. And then all of a sudden, a split cracked right up its own back, and it was crawling out of itself. We were tripping out. To any adult, I'm sure we just looked like some kids huddled around playing in the dirt right then, but fuck that. We were witnessing something worth watching that day. Slowly but surely, this beautiful yellow and green fucking bug climbed right out of its own old crusty ass and left nothing but an old dead shell of its former self. We sat around and watched this whole thing happen. It took hours. I thought that shit was the fucking freshest thing I'd ever seen. When it was all over with, the beautiful yellow and green bug expanded its new strong wings and finally flew off, probably to go kill some other bug and eat it. The whole shit was awesome, but soon after that, things were back to normal in that yard. Let me tell y'all, this Mary Wool lady, there was some bullshit going on in that house. She had 2 kids, Chris and Ricky Wool, who were right around our age. My brother Rob and I hated playing with them. See, they had this fucked up habit of unzipping their pants and waggling their dicks at us and chasing us around like that. We figured they were that way because of their mom, Mary Wool, who was a heroin addict looking skinny bitch with tattoos on her wrist. And remember, this was 30 fucking years ago when moms didn't have tattoos on their wrists and shit like that. One day, when my mom was picking us up, I asked her about Mary's tattoos. "What's that weird writing on Mary Wool's little chicken wrist about, Mom?" "Don't ask questions like that," my mom said. "After what would wind up happening to us as a result of knowing the Wool family, I kind of wish I would have known more about them then, so I could have killed them all off and most likely have gotten away with it because of my youth." Attention! Attention! Thugs, killers, and mass murderers. Everybody sit down in a circle around me. It's special emotional time. In this part of the book, I'm going to talk about 2 major childhood memories that really don't have anything to do with anything at all. They're just too important not to be included. If you're not interested in listening to me babble about life and emotional shit, just skip past this next part. For everybody else, here it goes. Before my mom met my second dad, that's how I remember my childhood, by what dad I was with at the time. 2 truly magical things happened that still live with me today. They were both major events of my childhood, and that's why I want to share them with you. Major childhood moment number 1. The first thing happened when my brother Rob and I were running around in my mom's front yard in Berkeley. He was 6 and I was 4. And we were chasing one of those colorful, humongous ass butterflies. Suddenly, my brother started screaming, Joe, I got it!" Rob had actually caught the butterfly. I was pretty fucking shocked, and so was he. So was the butterfly, I'm guessing. I don't really know how it happened, but I guess he jumped off the porch and actually cupped it in his hands, mid-air.
"It's prying my hands open, it's so big," he yelled. Get the jar!
We had a jar with holes poked in the top, which we always kept on our porch because we'd always catch shit like grasshoppers and praying mantises, anything fresh. We put this giant butterfly in the jar and we sat there staring at it. Wow! It was mad powerful looking. We noticed it had fur on its wings and all kinds of colors. It didn't even seem like an insect. It seemed more like a bird. We felt really guilty about having it in our jar. like we caught somebody's dog or something. It felt like an animal more than an insect. We said to each other, look, man, we're just gonna have this butterfly spend one night at our house and we'll let it go in the morning because this is way too big and too beautiful to keep. Besides, we don't know what it eats or anything. We'll have to let it go. We agreed. And as soon as we got up the next morning, we let it go. That night, it would be our guest. We just wanted to hang out with it for one night. We poked extra holes in the jar lid and put a screen over it to hook it up more. We had a fan in our room because it was mad hot, and we put the jar right in front of the fan. The butterfly was our guest, and we wanted it to be extra comfortable. We tried to sleep, but we kept hearing the butterfly's wings hitting the glass jar like it was talking to us. It was the shit. We were mad excited. Next morning, all we could hear was the fan. My brother and I looked at each other in horror. Then we looked up at the jar. The butterfly was dead. We were straight up crushed. Right there, brother, we started fucking bawling our eyes out. We felt like we just murdered somebody, actually. I guess we did. That sucked bad. So here's what we did. We dug a grave in the space between our house and the house next door. It was already a cemetery of sorts because this cat across the street was always killing birds and mice and shit, and we would find their bodies of the animals and bury them in that area. There was this place across the street that sold potato chips in a big metal can, so we got an empty one and made it into the butterfly's final resting place. We put a little couch in there made out of napkins and popsicle sticks and all kinds of other cool shit. With tears in our eyes, we placed the can in the grave and filled the dirt in on top of it. We felt so bad. We made a vow right then and there, a vow that we would continue to live by today. One day, we will make it to heaven so that we can make sure the butterfly made it and so that we can apologize to that butterfly face to face. If insects are not allowed in heaven, then we would ask to change that policy on the butterfly's behalf. Now, if you look on every single ICP album and EP, what does it say in the credits? It says dedicated to the butterfly. It's right there on the inside of my left arm as well. A big tattoo of a butterfly, also dedicated to the butterfly. I dedicate every major accomplishment in my life to the butterfly. I do this to remind myself of that important vow we made as kids. We must both keep on track all the way through life. I'll tell you why. Because back then, that day, burying that butterfly, feeling the way we did, my brother and I were like two clean cloths, unpolluted yet by life, pure and true. When we made that vow, we were the real untouched Joe and Rob Bruce. It was from the heart. As we go through life, we adapt to what really goes on in this world, and it teaches us. Other people in life teach you things like, hey man, don't hang out with girls unless you're trying to fuck them, dude. Or, what are you doing hanging out with those black kids for? The more you come in contact with other people, the dirtier you get. When you're a child, you go only by your heart because that's all you know. As I grew up, I reminded myself out loud. I made that vow when I was as pure as could be, before the world got me. When the only thoughts I had were the thoughts of my own in my own heart. I cannot let the world fuck me up so bad that I lose faith in that vow. As I write this, I'm fucked up. I'm very, very dirty from the world. One day I have to return to that innocent, pure thing that I was so that when I die, I can apologize to that butterfly. That's what dedicated to the butterfly means. That's exactly what I intend to do. Okay, let me just put it to you like this. If I was sitting on a public bus next to an old lady and I said a cuss word like fuck out loud, she'd probably be offended. She might even make a face and say something about it. Well, don't think she didn't spend her life sucking on dicks, being human and cussing herself, right? The only difference between her and I is that now she's returned to that pureness she once had as a child. She's been all the way around the block. She's probably seen it all before, and now she doesn't even want to hear the word fuck. She wants to be clean again. Well, there was a time when she was swigging booze, fucking around, tossing salads, sucking some guy's dick at a dance and all that. Now she's cleansed herself of that craziness. The old people you and I don't care about, those are the wisest fucking people out there. They're the ones who've seen it all. They've tasted both styles of life. And now in their old age, they choose pureness because they're wise. What was I talking about? Oh yeah, the butterfly. I'm almost done, just listen. Everything I do that I care about is dedicated to the butterfly. I take something so filthy, so raunchy, and so devoted to hate and revenge and anger like my albums, and I stamp dedicated to the butterfly on them because that was Joe Bruce who made that vow. Today's Joe Bruce wouldn't make that vow, but the future Joe Bruce will, and I will become him again one day in the future. Just don't say fuck next to me on the bus when I'm 90, or you might get a cane upside your melon. Major childhood moment number 2. This is the other magical thing that happened just a year after the butterfly incident. There was this kid in the neighborhood named Mark Walensky. He was older, probably 10, and he had about a foot on us in height, and he always walked around with a crew of bullies. We were terrified of him. He was a little baby thug. He was a troublemaker too. He once set a garage on fire and bragged about it. He only got away with it because he was too young to get prosecuted for it, and his parents were so white trash they didn't give a fuck. Luckily for my sister Teresa, she was always off hanging with her girlfriends at Skate World or something. Rob and I hung out on our block with assholes like Mark. Mark was always beating somebody up, usually my brother and I. A bunch of times I'd be riding on my bike and he'd stop me and he'd be like, "Get off your bike." He'd throw me off my bike and take it. He'd make me chase him around before finally giving it the infamous ghost ride. That's when a bully takes your bike from you, rides it as fast as he can, and hops off it. Then you have to sit there and watch your bike race down a block with nobody riding it until it smashes into something. All you can do is watch it smash into something, usually a tree or a car, or sometimes a wall of some sort. You just have to hope your bike ain't too badly fucked up afterwards. Many of my childhood bikes were casualties of ghost rides. Now, my mom hadn't married her second husband yet, and we were still poor as fuck. She was still a janitor, but to make extra money, she started watching this rich family's kids. When the family went to Boston that summer, they wanted to bring my mom along to watch their kids. It wasn't a vacation or anything, but we were pretty excited about my mom getting to go to Boston. My mom had never been out of Michigan, so it was a big deal for her and us. We ran around the neighborhood for months telling everybody,
My mom's going to Boston. My mom's going to Boston.
So everybody knew my mom was going to Boston. Because of our little big mouths, everybody knew that she left $50 with me and my brother and sister to buy food with. That was like millions. We're talking pizza every night, ice cream, chips and dip, root beer floats, all that shit. We bragged about it to everybody that would listen. Right after my mom left for Boston, my brother and I were in our front yard. Who comes around? Mark Walensky. He walked right up to us. "Hey, what's up, you guys?" My brother and I were really nervous because suddenly he was being mad cool. We tried to be cool too.
What's up, Mark?
I said, hoping to save my new Huffy from a treacherous ghost ride. "What are you guys doing, man? You like wanting to go do something?" We were nervous and marked out. We just said, "Sure." After a few hours, Mark got an idea. "Hey, ask if I can spend the night."
Well, you know, my mom's not here, I said.
"Yeah, I know. Ask your babysitter if I could spend the night. It'll be fun as hell. I heard you guys got chips and dip and everything." Rob and I were still sort of dazed. We were scared to death. We didn't want Mark Walensky's fat ass eating all our chips and dip and everything, but we were too scared to tell him no. So we went to our babysitter and straight up lied to her.
"Hey, this is Mark Walensky," I said. "He spends the night all the time. My mom knows him."
Truth is, my mom would have killed me if she knew a delinquent like Mark Walensky was spending the night at our house. The next thing we knew, Mark was knuckle deep in our French onion dip, spending the night eating all our pizza and everything else we brought. We even had sparklers. It wasn't even near a holiday, but he was having fun with them. He was the only one having fun. We were still scared of him, almost as scared as we were of my mom finding out he spent the night. Then something happened that night that changed everything. Actually, it changed everything for the rest of my life. We had our blankets set up on the floor at the top of the staircase with all the lights off. We were trying to whisper to each other in the dark, but the babysitter could still hear us, and she kept getting pissed.
Be quiet, you guys, it's bedtime.
All right, we said. We kept right on talking. All of a sudden, a pitch black head came up the stairs in the dark, then shoulders, totally fucking silent. A black oil figure was walking up the stairs. It was dark in the room, but this figure was pitch black dark. We could make it out as clear as anything. Now, we would have been pissing our root beer floats in our underoos, but the only way I can explain it is that I wasn't the least bit scared, neither was my brother Rob. It was more like 20,000 levels of excitement, just like when you bungee jump, like when you first hit the air, like holy shit! The figure walked up the stairs right in front of us. My brother and I were screaming, but the most amazing thing was this: Mark Walensky couldn't see it. He didn't know what the fuck was going on. "What are you guys looking at?" he asked. "What is it?" He couldn't see it. The shape continued to walk up the stairs. It walked all the way up and turned right toward us. Mark Walensky still didn't see a fucking thing. My brother and I couldn't make out his face, but we knew it was looking right at us. Clear as day, we knew exactly what it was. It was kind of like we knew exactly what it was right when we first saw his head coming up the stairs. It was God. No question, no doubt in my mind it was God. Fuck you if you don't believe me. I know what we saw that night. G-O-Diggity-D himself, the holy roller thunder bowler, funky fresh in the freaky flesh. God, baby. He turned and raised his arms. Then he put them down and slowly floated back down the stairs. Just from that one gesture, we knew the shape was saying, "It's all right." My brother and I were so fucking scared all night, so nervous about Mark Walensky, and it was like God came over to two innocent-ass kids and was like, "I know you're scared, but it's all right." After that, we didn't give a fuck about Mark Walensky. I was like,
"You didn't see it? You can't see it, haha. You couldn't see it."
I wasn't afraid of anything. I wish y'all could see the goosebumps on my arms right now just from talking about this shit. Even though I would have a more involved spiritual encounter later in life, that was the absolute greatest moment in my life. A miracle had just happened. We'd seen God. We'd heard him say so much without even saying a word. Fuck Mark Walensky. Fuck everything scary. Nothing is scary in the presence of God. When my mom finally came back from Boston, we ran out and started hugging her. We wouldn't let her get out of the car. We were all crying and telling her what had happened, that we had Mark Walensky spend the night, but God came over and told us not to be scared. My mom saw us crying and she started crying too. Everybody was crying. The only person not crying was Mark Walensky, who quickly returned to his old self again. Within a few days, the same old neighborhood bully dickhead was back in effect. He caught me coming back from the party store a few weeks later and thanked me for the chips and dip with a good old ghost ride for my Huffy. It was all good. My mom knew we weren't lying. We told our grandpa too, and everybody else who would listen. We didn't need to hear anybody give us props for what we had seen. Seeing what we had seen was props enough. A lifetime worth of props as far as I'm concerned. My mom was always religious, and she did work at a church. I was 5 years old, and this kind of shit was already happening to me. First, our vow to the butterfly, then God coming over and telling Rob and I everything was going to be okay, and you wonder why I think the Dark Carnival is so real.